Part 80. Terror Broadcast. Author, Chunji Long. Chapter 803. The other party saluted him, and Subai nodded slightly in response. To be honest, it was really difficult for Subai to bend down and return the salute. The woman did not stay too long. She came here to preach, not to make friends. She bypassed Subai and planned to go directly to the altar. However, when she walked around the coffin, her eyes were still on the coffin. Hills rested there for a moment. A little thief from the west was raised as blood food by me. Haha, the woman smiled noncommittally, her expression a little unnatural, but her figure quickly disappeared from here and appeared directly on the altar. Because Subai had always communicated in Chinese before, Hill's reaction was a little slower. He knew Chinese, but he had to translate the meaning in his own mind first. When he understood that Subai was pretending to be something he wanted, when he opened his mouth to retort, the Oriental woman who had preached the truth had already disappeared from here. This almost made Hills faint from holding back the pressure. What a proud person he was, how could he be willing to be stepped on by Subai as a stepping stone to show off? It's so shameless, it's so shameless. Hills kept repeating these words. Subai dejectedly sat down on the edge of the coffin with the blessing of auspiciousness. He looked at the angry Hills and didn't really care about him. In fact, the work of the guardian of the place of enlightenment really doesn't matter much. Especially for Subai, even if a few senior people come in by chance, Jixiang Ruyi can already solve it by himself. Subai has seen Su Fuegui do his job, that is, when the Taoist witness comes in, he will be able to solve it by himself. To show some respect, other than that, the enlightened person can do it alone. The gatekeeper at the factory would also be careful to see if thieves would come in and steal things at night, but Subai actually had very few things to worry about here. Of course, Subai would soon discover that he had thought too simply. If it were normal times, Subai would be happy to follow him to the altar to observe the scene of the sermon, but with his appearance now, naturally he couldn't observe it. It was not because he suffered for the sake of face. After all, the place of sermon was his territory. As a host, it is always not a good thing to act too weak when a strange guest appears. However, after waiting for a long time, Subai did not feel the loud noise of rocks falling off over there. This made Subai feel a little strange. Could it be that the woman was hesitating about what to bury herself, so she delayed for so long? However, the anger on Hills's face began to fade away, and turned into a smile. Dear Eastern friends, your home was really robbed. If Hills would make fun of him like this in normal times, Subai would not believe it, and might even ignore it. But now that Hills is acting like this, if he still has the intention to joke, then Subai will be convinced. Ruyi, go check out the situation. Subai immediately became serious. After all, he is not Su Fuegui. Su Fuegui has been lying here for 20 years. The curious babies sent from the West and the audiences who have come here to preach in the past generations can't make any waves in front of Su Fuegui. To put it simply, for both security guards, Subai was the kind who was lucky enough to be recruited after graduating from middle school, while Su Fuegui was the kind who was a retired general who had fought in the war before and took the initiative to become a security guard in order to continue to shine. In terms of level, there is really no comparison, even if they are all guarded by security guards. Ruyi went to check the situation, but a long time passed and Ruyi did not come back. The location of Subai's coffin is only a few hundred meters away from the altar. Although it is impossible to see the situation directly due to the angle and twists, for Ruyi, a round trip of several hundred meters only takes a few moments. I could tell when that woman just looked at me. Her figure was obviously self-fabricated. She must have made up her identity. You said, what is so shameful about a person who comes to attain enlightenment? Anyway, once the tombstone is buried, he will be the boss. Are you afraid that your enemies will find out and come to smash the tomb? But the broadcast gave her the qualification to come here to preach. How can this be fake? Subai said in disbelief. This is actually very simple. The qualifications broadcast to the enlightened person are because the broadcaster thinks you have this qualification. This kind of fraud is relatively difficult. You need to deceive the broadcaster, which is very difficult. But there is also a simple way, which is to crack the formation at the entrance and then come in disguised as a preacher. Subai still didn't quite believe that someone actually dared to do this. This was the closest place to the radio. It was equivalent to people selling fake medicine going to China, South China Sea, and South China Sea to defraud. Don't believe it, this kind of thing has happened many times in the West. Every year, there seems to be strong people who are stuck in the high-level position of the high-level audience. They try every means and finally even come to the place of enlightenment to find opportunities for excitement and enlightenment. It's just that you are special here in the East. Your previous one was a bug, so it's probably impossible to deceive him, but you are not. Hills is not at all anxious about the current situation. Generally speaking, brothers and sisters are like this. Normally, hello, 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 everyone, let's drink and sing together, but one day when I see you go bankrupt, the first one to gloat is probably also a brother. Unit. Ruyi hasn't come back yet, and Jixiang seems a little agitated. Obviously, the cat has also noticed something is wrong. It has been almost a quarter of an hour, and there is still no sound from there. This is a bit too incredible. No matter how much you hesitate to bury anything, you don't have to wait until now, right? And the person who is most comfortable here should be Subai. He is obviously a security gatekeeper, but he can't do anything when he knows there is something going on inside. This situation happens when he is at his weakest. This is really a damn coincidence. By the way, I remember you had a group of senior people here a while ago. Did you ask one of them to send you a message? Hill suddenly thought of something and asked leisurely, but it looked like the upper and lower parts of his body were not showing. The way they are separated at regular angles, this leisurely expression looks particularly weird. Did he leak the news? Subai finally understood. Su Fugui had just left, and it had only been more than a month since he had taken over as the guardian, when thieves came to the door. A senior person who can enter the place of enlightenment must have the support of a high-level audience, and his actions are not leaking information, Hills explained, and, in fact, there is another point, that is, he is stuck in the high-level audience. Listeners who have never been promoted are eager to find chances and opportunities. Even if they do something slightly outrageous, the radio will acquiesce. This is no longer a secret in our Western high-level audience circle. After all, based on the training model of radio, it is said that the people at the bottom are just cannon fodder, and only those at the level who can take the train are the kind of people it really likes and needs. That's why this woman changed her appearance deliberately. She doesn't need to deceive the broadcast, she only needs to deceive you. The broadcast has its own operating rules, and according to the theory of the broadcast, it has already arranged the position of guardian here. Then you, the guardian, should be responsible for all protection and security. It has every reason to turn a blind eye to those it feels it can temporarily turn a blind eye to. But the responsibility lies with me, right? Subai knew the style of broadcasting. It runs according to a set of procedures, but it also has its own modifications. In the place of enlightenment, broadcasting it is flexible, because it has a target of punishment, which is the guardian who failed in his duty, which is Subai. Haha, that's what it means, so if you can't stop her, then you will have to bear her sins, and the difficulty of your next story world will be much more difficult. According to your Chinese idiom, it is an unreasonable disaster. Subai spread his palm and tried to summon the jade seal of the Dian kingdom. The jade seal of the Dian kingdom is like a police gun. It is not allowed to be used indiscriminately and even has to be handed in for storage. But when it is really needed to be activated, it can definitely exert its full power. Great power. However, as soon as his palms exerted force and his mind started to move, Subai felt a sense of powerless emptiness in his body. He staggered. If Jixiang hadn't been holding him up from behind, Subai would have fallen down in the coffin. My current condition is really bad, so bad that I can't even summon the Jade Seal of Dian Kingdom. Subai's breathing began to become much heavier. With Subai's temperament, he was willing to fight with Hills to the end for the so-called tradition. Now, it is naturally impossible for him to be willing to help a stranger take the blame. Boom. 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 There were 3 shaking sounds from Huan Quan, like explosions. She's pulling out the tombstone. Subai immediately understood what was happening. The woman was pulling out the tombstone she had chosen from the bottom of the underworld. This was the first time Subai had seen the situation of being a thief. Didn't thieves always cover their faces and enter the owner's house to steal things? This thief was indeed disguised, but while stealing things, he put 2 things in the owner's house. Kicking firecrackers. She has the confidence, and she should be almost a high-level listener. If you are at your peak, you may use your status as a guardian and your geographical location to cause some trouble to her. As for you now, I can only mourn for you, unless you can recover quickly now. At this point, Hills immediately stopped because he found that he had confidently talked himself into a pit. Then, Hills looked to his side cautiously. He was thinking that Subai, who was in a panic at this moment, probably didn't understand what he almost said. But who knew that when he turned his head sideways, Subai's face would be less than a few centimeters apart, and the breath of both parties could directly hit each other's face. Subai looked at Hills with a smile on his face, but his voice became a little cold. Yes. Thanks for reminding me. Don't I happen to have a top-quality blood bag here? Terror Broadcast. Author, Chunji Dixiaolong. Chapter 804. Brother Bai, just sleep for a while. I'll call you when the place arrives. Skinny Monkey, are you out of your mind? How can I sleep on this mountain road with 18 bends? The fat man glanced at the thin man driving the car angrily, and continued, you two take a walk, slow down when turning, and don't overtake randomly. When you die, I will have to collect your body for you, which is too troublesome. The thin man did not dare to talk back to the fat man, but he still muttered in his heart, if there was a car accident, how could you survive if I died? Are you collecting the body for me? But he didn't have the guts to say these words in front of the fat man. The thin monkey had seen a fat man beat 5 or 6 local snakes to the ground alone in Chengdu. In the eyes of the thin monkey, the fat man was almost the same as Sammo Hung. Although he is fat, his physical skills are really not weak. The fat man opened the car window. It was raining outside and the car was driving on Provincial Highway 307. Li Bai, a poet of the Tang dynasty, once exclaimed, hey, how dangerous it is. The road to Shu is as difficult as climbing to the sky. In fact, this is not an exaggeration in poetry. Even now, the Shu road is still a frightening road. Even though the country has spent a lot of money to build roads and open many tunnels, especially after the Wenchuan earthquake, it cannot. After all the mountains were blown up and flattened, many roads are still on mountain roads. When driving on such roads, drivers not only have to be careful at every turn for fear of any accidents when turning, but they also have to be careful about slipping on the mountain. There are rolling rocks and landslides, and you don't know how many accidents and car accidents there will be every day. The fat man said before that if the thin monkey continued to drive so fast, he would have to help him collect his body. For the fat man, he would be fine even if the car fell into a cliff. But if the thin monkey saves him, in all likelihood, this guy will become an audience. Judging from the thin monkey's character, the fat man still thinks that it would be more pleasant and humane for him to simply fall to death. The thin monkey continued to drive, and after the fat man cursed a few times, he did slow down the car. Of course, there are indeed many turns here. You have to keep turning the steering wheel when driving, which is really troublesome for the driver. Very tiring thing. Brother Bai, it's been raining for almost 2 days. I think something is going to happen. Xiao Erhao was a truck driver in his early years. He traveled on roads like Sichuan all year round, so he was naturally familiar with some situations. It has been raining for 2 days, and you can even see a lot of rockfalls and soil collapse and landslides on the way here. Provincial and national highways are usually built in relatively stable and safe areas, and now it is like this. Those villages and small counties that exist under the hillside are naturally much more dangerous. Although Fatty's ancestors escaped from Nanjing after the Japanese invaded Nanjing, after all, he grew up and was born in Chengdu since he was a child, and he is extremely familiar with this place. I hope everything is safe, the fat man sighed. He was not a Superman after all, and there were countless villages at the foot of Sichuan Mountain, so it was difficult to take precautions even if he wanted to. The car started from Chengdu this morning, arrived in Zikang at noon, and finally arrived at the Lagu Lake Scenic Area at around 7 p.m. The fat man was indeed a little tired after riding for a day, and the thin monkey was also driving too tired at this time. After putting Fatty down at the entrance of the scenic spot, he went directly to a nearby hotel to rest. He owed Fatty a favor, so he drove Fatty here, and Fatty didn't ask him to accompany him to play in the scenic spot. The fat man was too lazy to buy a ticket, so he bypassed the ticket booth and entered the scenic spot. This scenic spot is actually similar to the one in Jiang Old Town. There are local residents and many tourism employees in it. Only vehicles from other places come here and the inspection is stricter. The scenic spot is very large, it is estimated to be the size of a county seat, or even more. However, the water surface of Lagu Lake cannot be seen at night, so it is no different from an ordinary countryside. The only ones with lights on are those inns and hotels, scattered here and there. The landing is located around the lake, which looks a bit cold. Ahem. The fat man coughed twice, smoked a cigarette, and then walked to the lake alone. Of course he came all the way here not to play, but to find something. The Lagu Lake Scenic Area has only been built in the past 10 years. After all, the domestic self-driving tour craze has only just started a few years ago. Fatty once knew an audience member who was also from Sichuan. That guy told Fatty when he begged Fatty for help in the story world. Fatty had a secret about Lagu Lake. Of course, that guy died in that story world later, and the cause of death even had something to do with Fatty. The fat man jumped directly into the water. There was a big temperature difference between day and night here, and the lake water was even bitingly cold late at night, but it was not a problem for the fat man now. According to the guy's description in his memory, it took the fat man about half an hour to determine a location. During the construction of the scenic spot, the lake must be a key target for improvement, and the listener worked here as a worker in his early years. The fat man continued to dive. Finally, when his feet sank into the muddy black mud at the bottom of the lake, he felt a cold breath hovering nearby. This feeling was like pushing open the door of a stranger's house in the middle of the night. Waking up a sleeping family. The Supreme Lord is as urgent as the law. The fat man recited a spell silently in his heart, and at the same time pulled out a piece of talisman. Even though it was under the water, the talisman still started to burn strangely. Brother, I am here for the first time in your precious land. I am looking for an opportunity. I ask the local mountain spirits and river gods to forgive me. I will definitely offer incense and offerings to reward you all the next day, the fat man continued to think silently in his heart. As a local, Fatty knows that there are many mountains in Sichuan. Since ancient times, the human population has been relatively sparse. Therefore, there are more mountain spirits and river monsters hidden here than other places. With Fatty's current behavior, there is no need to be afraid of them. But as the saying goes, the king of hell likes to see little devils being difficult to deal with, and Fatty doesn't want to cause more trouble when he is working on his own in this place. This is also a rule passed down from the ancestors. After saying hello to the men nearby, the fat man became rude. He slowly squatted down and started groping downwards with his hands, but he couldn't find anything except mud. Most of his body was almost sunk in. That guy was a worker who was renovating the lake. He said that the machine would malfunction when it was dredged above. He also sent 2 divers down to investigate, but the 2 divers did not come back up after they went down. Later, this incident happened due to various reasons were covered up, and the scenic spot continued to be constructed and opened as usual. Later, when the guy became a low-level listener, he brought his own diving equipment to investigate on his own. Because at that time, the low-level listener was looking for opportunities to find magic weapons left in the real world. As long as there was news somewhere, he would naturally search for it subconsciously. Go try your luck. Fatty originally wasn't very concerned about this kind of thing. After all, the guy knew him, and when he died, he was just an ordinary listener who was not even a senior person. But by chance, the guy's description of the thing at the bottom of the lake, it was very similar to something Fatty had seen before, so Fatty memorized it. Before, there were so many other things that it was not very convenient for him, and when it came to that thing, the fat man knew how much he weighed and didn't dare to touch it in a hurry. Now he was reborn from nirvana in the incineration furnace, with the strength of his soul. The advancement led to the advancement of the physical body and became an advanced audience, and Fatty also felt that it was time to get involved in that kind of thing. Damn it! The fat man cursed in his heart. Fortunately, the water in Lagu Lake is very clear and is also the drinking water for local residents. Therefore, even the mud at the bottom of the lake does not emit the same stench as an ordinary river, but groping like this deep in the water, it's really frustrating to explore and gain nothing. After a pause, the fat man made a seal with his hands, and a red peachwood sword flew out from his back. Stir. The fat man pressed his hands down to give instructions. The Daomu sword pierced directly into the mud and began to stir wildly. The churning almost made the fat man lose his footing and was swept out. But it was precisely because of this churning that a large area of the mud below was cleared. Something was also vaguely exposed. The fat man turned on the prepared waterproof searchlight and shined it, revealing something similar to a bronze plate. This should be just the tip of the iceberg, and the rest should still be covered by silt. Putting away the mahogany sword temporarily, the fat man quickly approached. When his hand rubbed on the exposed bronze plate, he immediately became convinced. Yes, that's it, exactly the same texture, exactly the same feeling. Fatty is naturally familiar with this thing. When he first met Dabai took this bronze box back to his hometown in Chengdu, but he was intercepted halfway. At that time, Fatty only thought it was a mysterious thing. Anyway, at that time, the magic weapon was good, bad, high, low, appropriate, or inappropriate. As long as it was a magic weapon, his eyes would glow green and he would grab it. But later, as Fatty learned about Sudbai's life experience, he also had a deeper understanding of the bronze box, which even made him feel a little creepy. At this time, in front of him, there was a large bronze plate with the same texture and material as the bronze box. So, what would be hidden in this one? The fat man didn't want to waste time by getting out of the water to take a breath, but continued to scrape the mud with his peachwood sword impatiently. More and more parts of the bronze plate were exposed, and at this moment, 2 pull tabs with the same shape appeared. Things were also exposed. Gritting his teeth, the fat man didn't hesitate too much. He immediately grabbed the 2 pull tabs with both hands, and then pulled them hard. Click. It was like a door that had been sealed for a long time was opened. In two figures, a man and a woman, suddenly appeared. Seeing this scene, Fatty was so frightened that his whole body trembled. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Terror Broadcast. Author, Chunji Disyao. Chapter 805. When he saw the corpses of a man and a woman floating out of the bronze door, the hair on Fatty's body stood up. There was a sense of despair deep in his heart. He even felt a little unsteady and had a tendency to drift with the crowd. Even though he had never met Dabai's parents, as a good friend of Dabai, how could Fatty not know how terrifying that man and woman were? A man and a woman who play tricks on radio and can control and change a listener's life. This kind of courage and skill, even if they are standing on semi-opposites, are still amazing. But Fatty really never expected that he would be so lucky, and he would win a big gift bag with just one draw. Subconsciously, the fat man began to exert force on his arms, and the bronze door naturally made no sound under the water, but it was just closed by the fat man. After closing the bronze door, the fat man looked at his hands in disbelief. Damn it! The door was just closed. Immediately afterwards, there was a period of silence that lasted for more than 10 seconds. Fatty was waiting for the bronze door to suddenly explode, and then a man and a woman inside came out and cut him into pieces. Or there must be many novel methods based on the way they treated Dabai. Come and burn yourself. The fat man has full confidence in the imagination and innovation of that man and woman. But after waiting for more than 10 seconds, the bronze door was still silent. It was opened so simply. It was simply closed again. It's like you are having a barbecue in the wild, and then you suddenly find that there is a poison gas bomb left behind when Japan invaded China buried under the barbecue grill. You find the gas bomb halfway through eating and then quickly put out the fire. The gas bomb did not being detonated makes you feel a little incredible. Damn, I'm still alive. The fat man pushed his legs on the ground and began to float up quickly. He surfaced quickly and took a big breath first. I have to say that the air here in Lagu Lake is indeed very fresh. After all, it is located deep in the mountains, so there is nothing wrong with it. Due to the pollution from the factory, or perhaps because of the introduction of fresh air, Fatty's heart, which was originally jumping around like a deer, gradually began to calm down. No, no. The fat man pursed his lips, then took a deep breath, performed his own breath-holding technique, and dived back into the water without hesitation. Returning to the place where he almost pissed himself before, the fat man bit the searchlight strap in his mouth, then put his hands on the ring. This time, he hesitated for a long time. Because you didn't die when you touched the tiger's butt and butt for the first time, maybe you were lucky, and the onlookers will also pray for you, but if you plan to touch it for the second time, you will definitely seek death, and the onlookers will. I would like to see the tiger eating this evil pen. But now that he's here, Fatty won't be willing to be scared away. At first, he was so excited when he saw the scene inside that he was a little confused. But Fatty knew clearly that even those two people inside the corpses were Subai's parents, and they couldn't come directly to kill him unless they were willing to expose themselves to the gaze of the broadcast. Besides, didn't they come out? After thinking about this clearly, the fat man used his strength again to open the bronze door. The corpses of a man and a woman were still floating 10 meters away from the door, but when Fatty's searchlight swept over, Fatty found that the two corpses seemed a little strange. When Fatty boldly moved closer, finally the identities of the two corpses were thoroughly confirmed. The diving suits on their bodies were gone, but the communicators on their wrists had not fallen off even after several years. This was enough to indicate their identities. They should have been in the water that year. Two divers who investigated the situation but did not return. Otherwise, you have to explain that Subai's parents were diving enthusiasts, so they deliberately left this thing on his body. But the fat man wouldn't believe this explanation even if his head was kicked by a donkey. Knowing that it was a false alarm, the fat man finally put his heart back. He paused, took out 2 talisman papers and pasted them on the foreheads of the 2 corpses. These were the soul calming talisman, drawn by the fat man himself. It was nothing. The specific effect is more like a peace charm given to someone who died in vain. I will take you out for burial when I go out, the fat man thought in his mind and stretched out his hands to push the 2 corpses away. Perhaps the water quality inside the bronze door is special. Even if the 2 corpses are soaked here, it has been several years, but it is like a specimen preserved in formalin, lifelike, without turning into the terrifying appearance of a giant. Continuing further in, only a dozen meters away, Fatty saw a table with various instruments next to it. It looked like a small laboratory layout. Moreover, there seems to be a barrier between the laboratory and the outside world. The barrier does not block the water, but it allows the entire laboratory to maintain a relatively beautiful state. For example, a beaker on the table contains a red reagent even if it is soaked in water, but still maintaining the original posture. The fat man reached out and touched the membrane in front of him. He didn't feel any resistance, and then he passed through it without any accident. However, his body slowly fell down at this moment, and the fat man who was originally floating actually stood with his feet on the ground in the laboratory. The fat man is a Taoist priest, not a scientific researcher, so the equipment in this laboratory is probably used for some kind of experiment, and the fat man has no idea. But after entering, Fatty's eyes were immediately attracted by the 3 coffins on the bronze wall on the far left side of the laboratory. The laboratory needs to conduct experiments, ranging from using fruit flies or mice to large ones using gorillas, but the one in front of you is obviously higher end. Just looking at the styles of these 3 coffins gives people a high-end feeling. The fat man reached out and rubbed his chin. Because it was soaked in the water, his stubble was not prickly at all, but the fat man still made this action out of habit. The 3 coffins are completely different in style. One is similar to the pharaoh's coffin in the ancient Egyptian pyramids and is placed in the middle. The other is a Western stone-carved coffin because it is engraved with characters from ancient Greek myths and legends. There is also another coffin. It belongs to the ancient Chinese style, with the front high and the back low, and there is something cushioning the middle. It is similar to the coffins in Hong Kong zombie movies in the early years. There may be nothing in the 3 coffins, but it is also possible that there is something in them. Fatty didn't dare to touch the coffin at first. He knew that if some things were tainted with the anger of a living person, it would probably trigger changes in it immediately. As heir of Taoism, Fatty was not that desperate. Now that he has discovered this place, it will definitely not be able to run away. Fatty can definitely find a chance to come again next time, such as looking for Monk Gyatso and the others, or adding another Dabai. Fatty still doesn't know that Dabai has become a civil servant. Looking around again, Fatty felt that this should be the place where Dabai's parents had stayed before, or a place they had used. But it was obvious that they no longer needed this place. But if he could discover the secret and purpose, if so, it should save a lot of time. Obeying the radio's assignments, becoming an excellent radio listener under the radio banner, and learning from the routes taken and the results achieved by those disobedient listeners. Fatty felt that the 2 were not contradictory. He had no intention of resisting the radio, but it would not be wrong if he took a closer look. Bad things, who knows what will happen in the future. However, when the fat man glanced around and just turned around, he suddenly felt a chill on his back. He was very sensitive to this and immediately took a step back and looked forward. The 2 diver corpses that were originally floating at the entrance of the bronze door actually floated here at this time, and the distance was much closer. Did he not close the door, so the water poured in, causing them to be rushed in? Fatty was thinking rapidly in his mind. However, the 2 corpses did not seem to give Fatty too much time to think. When they approached the barrier, Obvious changes began to occur on the corpses, one male and one female. Wetsuits began to reappear, and they even radiated life. The fat man calmed down. He knew what had happened. The two corpses seemed to be moved by the talisman and promise he had just made. Now they seemed to be sending messages to themselves, a bit similar to the form of dreams, because fat people have high moral standards, so they can use this method of truth and fantasy when communicating with fat people. This phenomenon is similar to fox demons or dead souls repaying kindness, or the previous people died here, but the dead souls still have compassion and remind future generations to prevent future generations from encountering the same misfortune. Of course, this way there are indeed a few souls who are kind and compassionate, and the vast majority of the souls who die in vain wish that the people who pass by here will also die here to accompany them. There are many legends of drowned ghosts in Chinese villages that have similar meanings. Wen Li, what is going on here? How can there be a laboratory under the water? The male diver said as he took off his mask. The female diver also slowly took off her mask. We have to hurry up and report up. No, we have to leave quickly. There is a laboratory hidden in the bronze door under the water of Lagu Lake. This kind of supernatural phenomenon is obviously not something that two ordinary divers can understand and accept. It is just like ordinary people seeing ghosts. In addition to being incredible, there is endless fear. The male diver seemed to want to show some courage and calmness in front of the woman, but soon, a more frightened look appeared on his face, and he almost screamed. Run quickly, the coffin in the middle is moving, it's moving. The fat man turned his head at this time and looked at the side where the coffins were placed. The one in the middle was an Egyptian pharaoh-style coffin. At this time, the coffin was really shaking slightly. It's like there's something inside that can't wait to come out. Terror Broadcast. Author, Chunji Dixiaolong. Chapter 806. The tremors of the mummy's coffin began to become more and more obvious, and the fat man almost cursed in his heart. In the past, Taoist priests knew how to prepare protective measures before doing anything, but in this laboratory, the three coffins were simply placed here. It's like holding three Samoyeds. Of course, the fat man actually knew in his heart that to that couple, these three coffins might not even be considered Samoyeds, but more like teacup dogs, because that couple had the confidence, but the fat man did not have the confidence. At this time, Fatty's first reaction was to run away. Although he was already a high-level listeners were not completely invincible. Unless they reached the level of a boss-level listener, it would be difficult to threaten them in the real world. It's something they need to survive, but advanced listeners are naturally much better than experienced people, but they still have to be careful when walking at night. The fat man jumped up and swam out. He also reached out to hold the two corpses and walked out together. Anyway, he just kindly reminded himself that tit for tat is retribution. Taoists believe in retribution and retribution. The fat man himself also understands cause and effect. Although he also understands that it is unwise to drag the corpses of two oil bottles when escaping, there is no better way. Buzz. A long series of muffled sounds came from the laboratory, and then Fatty found that the water around him began to smell rancid. The Chinese have a metaphor called the old woman's foot binding cloth, but this is simply incomparable to the ancient Egyptian mummy practice. Even if the corpse has been processed and mixed with spices, those cloth strips and the corpse have been with it for thousands of years and have been dyed. The smell is really unmatched by the old woman's foot binding cloth. The fat man immediately held his breath. He knew that he had made the right bet by running away. Damn it, God knows where the man and the woman got this mummy from. The thing that just came out of the coffin was actually full of, no less breathtaking than an intermediate level for advanced listeners. The division of the audience actually becomes more detailed as you go down, while it tends to become more general as you go up. For example, the gap between experiencers, low-level listeners, and ordinary listeners is indeed there, but it is not so obvious. When it comes to seniors, Seniors have a natal weapon, which is equivalent to having a suppressive advantage over non-senior listeners. And when it comes to advanced listeners, because they have the ability to resonate with the surrounding space, they have a suppressive advantage over senior listeners. The ranking of audience strength titles is based on practicality, and has been figured out and used by generations of listeners themselves. It cannot be that the broadcaster printed a listener-level research outline and circulated it to everyone. Experiencers, low-level listeners, ordinary listeners, and senior listeners, these four levels are like the second, third, and fourth floors on the ground floor, and then the fourth floor and up to the 100th floor are all high level. The scope of the audience, from the 100th floor to the height of Mount Everest, is the scope of the strength of the big-name audience. Therefore, the advanced listeners' primary, intermediate, and advanced levels seem to be one level after another, but in fact they are equivalent to the gap between the 5th level, the 50th level, and the 90th level. Because there are fewer people as you go up, naturally there is no need to go into too much detail, and it becomes much more general. Before, Subai faced the mid-level high-level listener hills, and the reason why he was able to win was indeed a coincidence, and it was also due to luck. But even though he had the right time, place, and people, he still relied on the summoned by hills in the end. Due to the greedy nature of the devil, even if Subai wins, it will be a miserable victory. This is enough to show the huge gap. If there is another PK and Hills is not so confident and naive and romantic, Subai really has a chance of winning. It's minuscule. Therefore, after noticing the aura of the mummy behind him, the fat man spread his legs and swam out desperately. The bronze door was already very close to him. The fat man knew that as long as he could get out of the door, he would close it again. The contents inside will definitely not come out. However, the other party seemed to know this, so he did not intend to let the fat man leave the bronze door so easily. In an instant, the fat man suddenly realized that the water around him started to flow backwards, and this powerful countercurrent actually cancelled his forward momentum, and his figure was still pushed further and further back despite desperately resisting and struggling. Pull. Grass. The fat man is really going to curse. If there was a chance to see Subai alive again, Fatty would definitely hug Dabai's shoulders and cry, "Dabai, your parents are such perverts, Fatty, I can't even beat the white mice in their laboratory." The fat man was about to cry. The more he tried his best to move forward, the force of the countercurrent knocked him upside down. As a result, the fat man could see the body standing behind him in the laboratory. Mummy. The whole body of the mummy was wrapped in white cloth strips, but because of the time, the cloth strips had long turned yellow-black, and a strong stench continued to emit from its body. The fat man remembered that there was no stench when he first came in. It was obviously because the two divers who came in before were really just little shrimps. There was no need for the one in the coffin to come out and take action. Gaugu's little finger could just lie down inside and deal with them. And now the fat man, well, is indeed a big shrimp. It's from Mr. Ge. The fat man was also driven to panic. For the audience, they are the most rebellious people. They know the importance of their lives, but under the temper and torture of the radio, they also know that sometimes if they continue to fight hard, if you don't have the courage to do so, it will be difficult to save your life. However, just as the fat man let go of the two corpses and prepared to fight with the mummy, a muffled sound suddenly came from the other side of the bronze door. Dong, dong, dong. 3 muffled sounds were heard, and the fat man felt that the extremely fast countercurrent flow had stopped. The mummy had 2 green rice beads revealed from the bandage strips. He looked towards the bronze door behind the fat man. What's going on? The fat man turned his head and looked behind him, only to find a woman standing by the bronze door. The ring finger of her left hand was tapping there casually. This leisurely expression and posture carried a kind of contempt for everything. Temperament. The woman is very beautiful. To be precise, she is very charming. She is like a singer on the stage of old Shanghai. She can arouse the hearts and souls of men with every smile. The mummy seemed to be hesitating, or lingering. He looked at the fat man, then at the woman, and finally raised his arm slightly, and the bandages on his body seemed to suddenly come to life, turning into strips of white. Poisonous snakes circled around his body. The woman frowned slightly. Obviously, her warning just now was not really accepted by the mummy. The other party didn't know whether she was trapped here and was stupid or something, but she actually wanted to fight with her. The woman sighed. Obviously she was in the water, but her sigh echoed directly in the space inside the bronze door. Before the sigh completely dissipated, the figure of the woman who was originally standing by the bronze door appeared in the laboratory in the blink of an eye, and was standing in front of the mummy. The white poisonous snakes on the mummy seemed to be stimulated all of a sudden, and they rushed towards the woman crazily. At the same time, they were burning, and the poison was corroding even the space. This kind of poison has gone beyond the realm of poison in the ordinary sense. It can even poison the soul and space. It is no longer simply destroying the human body. Just like some truly powerful spiritual system enhancers, they can set off a spiritual storm. Can still make houses and rocks fly into the sky, just like a real tornado. The fat man was confused now. He had so many gift bags tonight that he couldn't believe it. First, he really found the gift bag left by Subai's parents, and then he found the Egyptian gift bag. Also sent out, and then this charming beauty gift package appeared. However, no matter which one of these three gift packages, Fatty could not tolerate. This made Fatty's enthusiasm for successfully advancing to the next level suddenly weaken a lot. He was playing in one circle after another. In the past, he was in the circle of seniors. At that time, the senior audience members were shouting at each other and being called adults. Fatty naturally felt that the senior audience members were extremely awesome. But now that he has become a senior audience member, the circle he comes into contact with is suddenly different, and he has become a leader in this circle again. At the bottom, unless the fat man is so bored that he is willing to go to a group of senior people to gain a sense of existence, this feeling of depression and bottom will definitely stay with him for a long time, unless he climbs up in the senior audience circle. However, lust makes people bold. Fatty is lustful, and he never hides his lust. He is different from Subai, who develops into obsessive-compulsive disorder. He has always had a tolerant heart, even if he was with when monk Subai and the others go out to do things. He also likes to call some local women who have lost their feet in the hotel to care for them and comfort the people. Therefore, the fat man is still staring at the woman's mouth with great interest. That small mouth is really tempting. If he can eat his own. The poison turned into white poison rushed towards her face, and even the surrounding space began to distort. However, the woman opened her mouth directly and sucked the terrible poison that poured in front of her into her mouth. Then, from its delicate a wisp of light white air came out of the charming nostrils, and the woman's face also showed a look of enjoyment, as if she was smoking a big cigarette. The fat man lowered his head and looked at the guy below him, and then looked at the woman's small mouth that he thought was very charming before, and suddenly felt his balls twitching slightly. Terror Broadcast. Author, Chunji Dixiaolong. Chapter 807. The fat man looked at the beautiful woman at first, then looked at the dinosaur. When the woman completely sucked the mummy dry and turned it into a real mummy and slowly turned into fly ash, the fat man changed into looking at the devil. For a time, the fat man's estimate of the woman's strength made a series of jumps across levels. First, he was an intermediate-level advanced listener, and then he was a high-level advanced listener. Then he realized that it was not right. This was obviously the top level of the advanced listener, which was only one step away from enlightenment. A strong woman from far away. Women seem to enjoy this feeling very much. After all, there are too few non-audience creatures with such strong strength and high life levels in the real world. Even if there are, they are all hidden in dark places, making it difficult to find them. It's troublesome, and she can't kill high-end listeners at will to drink it, and she can't bear the anger of the radio. At this time, the woman glanced at the other two coffins with some dissatisfaction. From a distance away, the fat man could even feel the gasps of the two people lying in the two coffins. But women seem to think that good things should be enjoyed slowly. Take one today, and then take another one next time when you can't bear it any longer. This way you can satisfy your craving. Anyway, these two things can't get out of this bronze door. The place designed by a man and a woman, and the mice in the laboratory will definitely not be able to escape. Immediately, the woman looked at the fat man. The fat man was stunned for a moment, and then he showed a very difficult smile. Even though the lake water poured into his mouth because of his open lips, the fat man felt that he still had to show his friendliness. "You, follow me." The woman pointed at the fat man. And the fat man suddenly had a feeling. They are just here for you. Yellow paper fluttered, and two simple graves were erected here. The fat man recited scriptures about transcendence, which was regarded as sending the two divers on their last journey. As the saying goes, it is convenient for you to do things with others. The Taoists have passed down very strict rules since their ancestors, such as repaying kindness, such as cause and effect. Especially the cause and effect that ordinary people think are dirty things need to be taken seriously. How can you avoid getting your shoes wet when you often walk by the river? Especially the places where real Taoists come and go the most are so-called unclean places. If you are not careful in such places, your life will be in danger. If there are local dirty things to remind you, and help is really like saving a life. The woman stood leaning on a rock on one side, and did not show any dissatisfaction with the fat man talking about the burial person there. The audience circle was very strict, and with the intimidation of broadcasting rules, it was difficult for powerful listeners to go. You can only attack and exploit weak listeners unless you are willing to pay a sufficient price. Therefore, listener circles at all levels can develop independently. After the fat man finished the ritual, he walked up to the woman and shrugged, "I've done it." The woman had told the fat man before that she wanted the fat man to go with her and help her do something. If the fat man did not agree, the woman would kill the fat man directly at the risk of being punished by the broadcast. Regardless of whether the woman is telling the truth or trying to scare people, the fat man can only pinch his nose and give in. What if he meets a female Dabai again? Where are we going? How can I help you? Fatty was constantly thinking about it when he was helping the two divers to cross over. Fortunately, Fatty was flexible and flexible. He had also worked as an errand boy for Lychee back then, so he didn't have any psychological pressure in this regard. Now, since he was named, if the surnamed land wants to take him away, then he might as well take the initiative. Lychee has already left, but this woman may not be another Lychee in the future. Looking at the way the woman sucked the mummy directly into ashes, you can tell that she is also a wild and uninhibited master. "Son, why don't you hug me now that you have thick legs? Why has Xiezhen always been the best among his peers? Are you different regardless of your status? Isn't it true that he is protected by a boss who lives and eats with him? Even if according to the rules of broadcasting, the strong unconditionally helping the weak will make it more difficult for the weak in the story world, but if it is a courtesy and mutual use of each other, then it makes sense. It will be of great use in future breakthroughs." Therefore, after understanding this point, the fat man's subjective initiative came into play immediately. Zhang Bei, you should know this. My Taoist name is King Yunzi, but I don't use it very much. I am proficient in the 5 elements, Bagua and Zhuyi deductions. I am also familiar with Eastern and Western formations. I am also proficient in weapon refining, nourishment, and medicine. Before the fat man had formally introduced himself, the woman interrupted him and asked, "Subai, you know him, right?" Fatty suddenly felt his heart hurt. The distance from Lagu Lake to Lijiang Old Town is only over 100 kilometers, and then from Lijiang to Dali. Although driving is tiring, it is also convenient for self-driving. When we were traveling from Chengdu to Lagu Lake, the fat man had a thin monkey driving the car. But now, there is no other way, so the fat man can only act as the driver himself. Is that buddy of mine really a civil servant? Fatty muttered as he drove. It's so damn comfortable. It has a backer to guarantee the harvest during droughts and floods. It's awesome. There's no reason why Fatty doesn't think so. Ordinary listeners are constantly doing chivalrous acts to flatter the broadcasters or doing practical tasks for the broadcasters just to gain a little bit of favorability, but now Subai is directly eating the imperial food as an errand, leaving the Qing dynasty during the year. It was like a slave who had been enslaved was suddenly promoted, and he received 2 yellow flags. Maybe he is not very willing. The woman didn't say much in reply to the fat man along the way, nor was she cold. It was just like if the fat man was sitting in the car and was an ordinary senior driving, the fat man would probably be too lazy to go. The more we talk to each other, it's just a matter of different levels, and we have less common language. I believe this. My buddy's family conditions were relatively difficult since he was a child. He suffered from domestic violence, parental relations, domestic cold violence, etc., so he was mentally abnormal. Anyway, Dabai is not here, so there is no psychological pressure for fat people to sell gay friends. It is indeed not easy to be the son of those 2 people, the woman responded. Obviously, at her level, she is qualified and has the channels to know some things. Along the way, Fatty chatted a lot with women. Most of the time, he took the initiative to find topics to talk about, but the woman's occasional responses frightened Fatty. In terms of feeling, Fatty even felt that this woman was scarier than Liang Sen. When he thought about this, Fatty suddenly felt that Liang Sen, a coward, could be promoted to a boss. This was an incredible luck. The car drove into Dali. The woman did not plan to rest. She asked the fat man to walk around Urhai Lake first. Of course, the fat man knew that the woman was not sightseeing around the sea, but should be in the place called the Place of Enlightenment. Soon, the woman asked the fat man to stop at a place, and then signaled the fat man to drive directly up the mountain. There is no mountain road here, but the fat man gritted his teeth and stepped on the accelerator. The slope was not high. Because there was no road, the ride was naturally very bumpy. Slowly, between 2 undeveloped slopes, the woman motioned to the fat man to stop. Immediately, the woman got out of the car. The fat man naturally followed him and got out of the car. I'll find the formation and untie it. You just need to help me maintain the formation, the woman said. This is equivalent to letting the women do 99% of the work themselves, and the fat man will do the 1%, and even a senior person who knows the formation can complete the 1%. Seemingly seeing the fat man's incomprehension, the woman added another sentence, I'm afraid that your friend will go crazy and wait for me to go in and won't let me out. If he forces everything to break the closed circle, then yours will not be able to maintain, the circle will be implicated. Then wouldn't I be very sorry for him, Fatty said hesitantly, then gritted his teeth, no, 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 this won't work, I've tricked him before, and almost caused him and the monk Buddha to die, this kind of thing I don't want to do it a second time. I promise you not to kill him. The woman glanced at the fat man, for the final promotion, as a guardian of the Place of Enlightenment, if he wants to fight me to the death, do you think I can't kill him? As long as I can be promoted successfully, broadcasting will also turn a blind eye. The fat man bit his lip and said, don't hurt him. Don't kill him. Don't hurt him, Fatty insisted again. Then you can go die now. The woman raised her hand in gesture. Don't kill him, the fat man looked determined, as if he didn't notice the slip of the tongue. The woman stretched out her hand, as if responding to something. About 3 minutes later, a white halo of light rose from the ground. The fat man didn't even need to insert the formation flag. Before the woman walked into the white light and disappeared, she directly threw the formation guide to the fat man. As long as the fat man kept it intact, it was fine. Alas, the fat man sighed. He didn't know whether he was helping Dabai or cheating Dabai by doing this. But when a real strong man starts to act unreasonably and even accepts the punishment of broadcasting, he will insist on his own way. I really don't have many choices for myself and others. At this moment, Fatty's cell phone rang, and it was actually a call from the monk. The fat man answered the phone while concentrating on maintaining the formation introduction. "Hey, monk, why do you miss me all of a sudden?" "But, Fatty, where are you? What are you doing?" The fat man thought about it for a while. He left Lao Fang's house before to find a position for himself. At this time, it would be too embarrassing to say that he was following a woman as a bastard, so he said, "I'm playing in Hong Kong. There are 2 Hong Kong starlets next to me. They have just come out of the shower. If you have anything to say, monk, I will do something inappropriate for a monk later." Fatty. While talking, the fat man was still gasping deliberately, as if he was really lying on the bed of a high-end hotel in Hong Kong and enjoying the service. Even the changes in his breathing had an obvious rhythm, which was more real than real. "Oh," the monk responded and stopped talking. The fat man continued to pant while gritting his teeth and making a nasal sound. Seeing that the monk suddenly stopped talking, the fat man patted his butt and made a crisp sound, then took the phone away and shouted, "Climb down and spread your legs, be good, yes, that's it." Then he shouted to the mobile phone, "Monk, what's going on? Come on, tell me, fat master, I'm about to enter the cave." But, look to the west of you," the monk said. The fat man turned his head and looked to the west. On a hilltop not far to the west, the fat man saw the figures of 2 men, one wearing a cassock and the other wearing a lama suit. Moreover, the 2 monks each held a telescope and were looking at themselves. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Terror Broadcast. Author, Chunji Disyao. Chapter 808. Don't even think about it. Hills refused firmly. He glanced at Subai and Ji Xiang beside Subai, and said firmly, "I would rather explode my soul than allow myself to become your blood bag." At this moment, Subai seemed to see a staunch and unyielding revolutionary, but Subai knew in his heart that even though Hills was more of a cripple than a cripple now, if he was really determined not to let himself suck blood, there was no way to stop him from self-destructing. Subai was really hesitant about this kind of thing that would harm others and not benefit himself, so he had to say, "I won't be able to suck you out of your realm, at most you will fall into a coma. I promised not to kill you before, so naturally I won't let you die. Secondly, why do you threaten me with your own life? I have no relationship with you. For no reason, you put a knife to your neck like I don't care." Hills was stunned for a moment. He felt that what Subai said seemed to make sense. The threat he just made was like a girl holding scissors to her neck and saying to the gangster, "Don't tarnish my innocence, or I will die. Show you." This made Hills feel very uncomfortable. Why was he at such a disadvantage in front of this Oriental man? But when Subai grabbed his shoulder with one hand, Hills still glared at Subai angrily. Subai also knew that there was a war between heaven and man in his mind, but for the current plan, there was only this way. The guardians of the 2 major enlightenment places in the east and the west were now disabled. It happened that at this time, the family entered the war. Damn it, this is really embarrassing. Before Subai's fangs actually pierced Hill's skin, he felt a wave of waves coming from Hill's soul. Grass. This guy is really going to blow himself up? I suck your blood, not to you. Subai's fangs could only pause. At that moment, Subai said harshly, "This woman can open the entrance magic circle by herself. Do you think she can't understand the teleportation magic circle here? A strong person who is proficient in formations and is almost at the level of a boss-level audience." In order to achieve the final breakthrough and enlightenment, she did not hesitate to come to the place of enlightenment to steal things. You thought she would not stop by your place of enlightenment in the West to steal some tombstones. She doesn't understand the principle of combining Chinese and Western elements. Don't just see that I am unlucky now, but I can guarantee that your end will not be better than mine. When Hills heard these words, his mind began to stir. Lend me your blood for the time being. After this matter is over, I will release so much blood and return it to you in front of you. This time, I will be the guardian of our place of enlightenment in the East and West. Let's work together, we are on equal terms, I am not the master, and you are not my concubine. This was Subai taking the initiative to help Hills find a way out. Subai was really dumbfounded by this guy. Even if he was a noble person like himself, he would not refuse to give blood to others if he encountered this situation, but he is a guy who regards honor as equal to his life. Really are. A breath of fresh air in the audience circle. This is our cooperation, in order to protect the places of enlightenment in the East and West together and fulfill our responsibilities, Hills said while looking into Subai's eyes. Yes, Subai responded immediately. Then suck it. Hills closed his eyes, as if resigned to his fate. Subai was no longer polite, and his fangs quickly penetrated into Hills' skin. Gudu, gudu. Mouthfuls of blood were swallowed by Subai into his belly. Hills is a strong person in the middle level of the advanced audience. In addition, he is a magician and martial artist and has the blood of Yamata no Orokai. Therefore, his blood is extremely valuable, and the value is high. Under the premise, the effect of quantity can be reduced to the greatest extent. Subai also controlled his own amount to prevent him from sucking Hills to death. At that moment, he felt that it was almost done, so he pulled out his fangs and licked his lips with his tongue, not sparing a drop of blood. Hills fell to the ground with a dull look in his eyes, his body slightly deflated, as if Subai had picked up yin and replenished yang, but this kind of blood essence and blood being sucked is actually no different from being a stovetop. It's just that Subai's identity as a vampire eliminates the need for a series of tedious energy conversion processes such as refining. Over there, the woman was walking back. Every step she took made the ground tremble. When her figure appeared in Subai's field of vision, Subai couldn't help but gasp softly. Gas. 3 tombstones, which were the size of heavy trucks, were carried by the woman on her shoulders and walked over. Compared to the tombstones, the woman's smile was really frighteningly weak, but she didn't seem to notice it. The woman carried the tombstone to the steps of the coffin and looked at Subai, who was standing in the coffin. By this time, it's time to show off. Women know this very well. Unless the guardian of the Eastern Enlightenment place is a guy with a brain problem, from the other party's point of view, it is impossible for him to let himself take the tombstone out like this. Put things down and people can leave. Subai stood in the coffin and said. This means that as long as you put things down, you can forget about it. Although Subai also knew that this was nonsense, he still had to say it because he knew that he could not defeat the woman in front of him, but he had to face it. In fact, if I had fought that battle with Hills without thinking, I could have joined forces with Hills to deal with this woman. In that case, the chance of winning would be much higher. Now, I have not fully recovered, and I can face it alone. This woman really doesn't have much chance of success. I promised others not to kill you. Women tell the truth. Subai didn't bother to think about the woman's promise not to kill him, but the woman's response was already very simple, meaning I can defeat you and leave with the tombstone. Subai spread his palms, and the Dian Kingdom jade seal on the altar floated autonomously, turning into a green light and falling directly into Subai's palms. At this moment, Subai sensed the power contained in the jade seal of the Dian kingdom. Only when needed, the jade seal of the Dian kingdom can play a role in his hands. Usually it can only be regarded as an exquisite antique. Then, come on. The coffin at Sudbai's feet immediately rose into the air, let out a roar, and carried Sudbai directly towards the woman. The woman was still carrying the tombstone, but the menacing Sudbai didn't seem to cause any confusion in her. She just calmly stretched out her only free left hand and pushed forward. Boom! The woman's slender left hand touched Sudbai's coffin, and the entire place of enlightenment trembled at this moment. The corpses and souls in the underworld who like to howl and cry day and night all fell silent at this moment. Now it's two gods fighting, and they really don't dare to suffer the slightest impact. Retreat. The woman said this word weakly, as if she had no interest in fighting Sudbai. The Sudbai in front of her looked like a younger brother who was in elementary school and came to his older sister Dees, who had taken the postgraduate entrance examination, with elementary school math Olympiad questions and said, "The advanced math questions here are so difficult, and you definitely can't calculate them." Sudbai's figure broke away from the coffin, and the coffin under him flew out upside down, hit the rock wall, and then fell down slumped. The jade seal of the Dian kingdom in the palm shone with radiance, and strips of underworld water were sucked out, turning into chains of underworld with terrifying majesty. The chains seemed to have life, rushing towards the woman of their own accord. The woman's eyes stayed for a moment on the jade seal of the Dian kingdom in Sudbai's hand. Then, her figure suddenly disappeared, and the three tombstones that were originally carried on her shoulders fell together. But the woman's figure suddenly appeared in the air, and the yellow chains were directly crushed by her. Then, when the three tombstones were about to touch the ground, the woman returned to their original position in time, just in time to drag the tombstones back. This process, like Guan Yu warming wine and beheading Hua represents a kind of crushing. The jade seal of the Chuan kingdom once again bloomed with cyan brilliance. This time, ancient paintings began to appear on the rock walls in the place of enlightenment. The ancient paintings recorded the civilization of the ancient Dian kingdom, with complete clothing, food, housing, and transportation, so naturally war is inevitable. Dong 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 dong. A crisp sound came out, as if from the long river of ancient history, a cavalry from the ancient Dian kingdom was roaring in. It really had a majestic and terrifying momentum, bursts of shouts, and roars, like a dream. The phantom cavalry is coming. Hee hee. The woman laughed twice. No matter how strong we are, we can't compare with the Qin army. The woman let out a sigh, and then her eyes flickered for a moment, and a black crack appeared in front of her. Iron Horse Bing he fell into a dream, but she led the dream into nothingness. A massive offensive was so easily dealt with by the woman. The thunder was really loud and the raindrops were extremely small, and the woman's calm temperament from the beginning to the present gave her aura, completely filling the entire place of enlightenment. She does have the ability to turn against guests here, and she has indeed proven herself to have this ability. Sudbai, holding the jade seal floating in the air, felt weak for a while. He even felt that this woman might be stronger than Liang Senator. Even though Liang Sen had already achieved enlightenment, this woman had not yet. In fact, this woman, the pressure on him was really too strong, or maybe Liang Sen just ignored it because he knew him so well. The woman continued to walk forward, and the smoothness of the jade seal became weaker and weaker. It was obvious that there was nothing that could be done about the Dian country's jade seal. Sudbai had no choice but to sit down in front of the woman, squatting down slightly and getting ready to attack. The woman stopped and looked at Sudbai as if looking at a piece of exquisite porcelain. Then the woman smiled. "If it were your parents here, I wouldn't be able to get through it. But you can't stop me." Terror Broadcast. Author, Chunji Dixiaolong. Chapter 809. If it were your parents here, I wouldn't be able to get through it. But you Can't stop me. Translated, this sentence is almost like praising your parents for being awesome, and I admire them very much. For ordinary people, when others praise their parents for being awesome, they feel proud of themselves. But when it comes to Subai, it feels particularly harsh, because since this woman knows that she takes advantage of her parents, she must also know how her son came to be. When you say this at this time, there is contempt and disdain in it. No, there is no contempt or disdain. This is a kind of disregard, complete disregard. Subai didn't hate being ignored, but he hated it when someone commented on the man and woman in an elder's tone in front of him. In fact, in other words, what kind of onion are you putting here? Lychee was also teased and applauded by the man and woman, thinking that he was like this. Can you compare with Lychee? Can he be compared with Lychee, who is currently stuck in the most critical step of advancement, jumping over the wall and running to the place of enlightenment to steal things? And it just happened that he knew that the old guy Su Fuegui was no longer there, and that the place of enlightenment had changed people, so he dared to come and steal things. It was so obvious that he bullied the weak and feared the strong, and now he was still commenting on Su Yuhang and Su Yuhang with a shy face and a calm face? Yes. If they stand here, you will definitely not be able to get through. But do you dare to stand in front of them? The woman probably didn't know what Subai was thinking, and she didn't bother to think about it. Instead, she walked forward directly. Even if Subai stopped in front of her, she still carried the tombstone and continued walking forward with a kind of momentum. Step points began to accumulate continuously, slowly creating a superposition. When this superimposed momentum rested on Subai, Subai felt a painful feeling of blood flowing back. This woman is indeed very beautiful, and she is indeed very powerful. Subai has compared her with Liang Sen before, and now he can almost conclude that even if this woman has not advanced yet, is not a real big shot audience, and has not preached, but her combat prowess, pure combat effectiveness index, is really not inferior to that of Gendeo's boss. But Subai still stood here and didn't move. It's not that he was angry with this woman. Young Master Su had been lying here for almost 2 months, and he had been cultivating himself for a while. In addition, the story in One Day in Prison, the fight with Su Yuhang in the world, was so exhausting that young Master Su's temper calmed down a lot. Even if he knew that the woman in front of him was showing off and ignoring him just now, young Master Su was not very angry. But you really can't delay what you need to do. With the radio's temper and reasonable way, you are the guardian. If people steal things, if you are generous and let people take things away, then you are committing a heinous crime. If he was injured in a fight with a thief and was unable to stop him due to lack of strength. That makes sense. Boom. The front end of the tombstone touched Subai. Subai moved forward and carried it, but then he felt that his newly restored bones had cracks at this time, and Subai's interception did not slow down the woman's body. At each step, she still maintained her previous speed, without gaining or losing a point. Slowly, Subai's figure was pushed down the steps. Once he passed the location of the 12 coffins, he walked forward through the corridor with sculptures on both sides and reached the location of the teleportation formation. The woman looked at Subai and shook her head slightly. However, at this moment, Subai suddenly let go of his hand and stepped aside, as if he didn't intend to continue carrying it. This made the woman's eyes slightly confused. "Give up," the woman said. She was not aloof from the world, just as she occasionally responded to Fatty's nagging when he was driving, but at this time Subai let go of his hand and stepped aside, which really surprised her. Although it was just a movement of retreating, Subai felt that his whole body was aching in his bones. This was not an exaggeration, but this woman's strength. It was really terrifying. If he took an X-ray now, it should be possible. The dense cracks on Subai's bones were clearly visible. "I can't handle it," Subai was very honest. The woman continued to walk forward, You seem to be a little different from what I expected. The place of enlightenment does seem to be a good place to sharpen your mind. Do you understand me very well? Subai asked. The woman nodded. I know about your parents, so naturally I know about you. It would be strange for a baby who grew up in such an environment to become normal. I've seen lychees, Subai suddenly said. So what? The woman continued to walk forward carrying the tombstone. According to her speed, she should reach the location of the teleportation circle in 3 or 4 minutes. It's not that she didn't want to go fast, but because she was walking at the same time, he must be distracted to suppress the aura in the tombstone. People should often compare you with lychee, right? Subai now took out a cigarette and lit it. It seemed like a normal chat. This person is obviously a thief, stealing things, but the guard is leaning against the door and watching the person move out, with a cigarette in his mouth leisurely. This scene is indeed outrageous. The crux of the problem is that you can just turn a blind eye to things that come from the public or company bosses, but this thing is broadcast. Often the woman nodded slightly, but she continued to move forward. Well, they are all women, and they are all so domineering, but why do I feel that you can't pretend to be lychee? Subai asked doubtfully. Haha, the woman laughed dryly, not caring about this comment and not intending to discuss this matter too much with Subai. Oh, it's so boring. Subai looked over at Hills, who was still staring and fainting. The probability of encountering a thief in the land of proving the way is not high, but once you do, the thief must be extremely terrifying. Those without self-confidence and strength would not dare to come to the land of proving the way to steal things, but it is no coincidence that the two guardians of the East and West are the two had just had a fight before, and both sides were hurt. This was embarrassing. The woman walked until she was about 1 minute's walk away from going out, and then she said, I thought you would become impatient when I talked about your parents. The woman's eyes gently glanced at Subai behind her. Because Subai didn't stop her, the woman had already moved forward a long way, and Subai was still standing far away, so he was naturally behind. Did you do it on purpose? Subai held the cigarette in his hand and took a puff, as if he didn't take it seriously. Curious, the woman made no secret of her curiosity about Subai, but this curiosity was just like a tourist visiting a zoo to see rare animals. People will always change, and I can't live in the shadow of the past. I always have to try to come out and live a new self of my own, Subai said seriously. Boring, the woman continued walking forward. My existence and life are not meant to make you feel interesting, and you are so powerful and unworldly. I was so excited by you that I jumped up in front of you, and then jumped around and had all kinds of fun. Son, didn't I just let you watch the monkey show for free? It's even more boring, the woman responded. At this time, there were about 30 seconds to go to the teleportation circle. It seemed that the woman was a little disappointed because of Subai's changes. She seemed to be a little uninterested. I thought there would be something interesting, so I asked Zhang Bei to help me protect the introduction of the formation outside. You think so highly of me, I don't know how to control the formation here. Subai was telling the truth, he couldn't control the formation here. When people are cornered, they will always find a way. The woman still has 15 seconds before the teleportation circle. This is actually very unfair, Subai sighed. Yeah, the woman responded. This place of enlightenment is said to be a place of enlightenment, but in fact it is equivalent to a study room of broadcasting. The tombstones here are equivalent to the paintings and calligraphy of famous artists collected by broadcasting, right? Subai asked. Appropriate. So when a disciple with a bright future who might be inspired to become a great painter or calligrapher at any time wanted to come here to steal a few paintings in order to make a breakthrough, the master deliberately turned a blind eye in order to collect more paintings in the future. I closed my eyes, but the blame will still fall on the doorman who looked after the studio. Appropriate. The woman was only a few steps away from the teleportation circle, but Subai hadn't moved yet. When the woman stood completely in the position of the teleportation circle, Subai still didn't move. The woman was a little disappointed. Perhaps, she was really curious about the male and female test subjects. When the white light slowly flashes, the woman closed her eyes slightly, waiting for the transmission. The situation has been settled, and it is much easier than I expected. It seems that something went wrong on the Guardian's side first. The woman thought to herself that it was even possible that all of this was a deliberate arrangement by the broadcaster. However, at this moment, boom! A loud noise came out. The woman opened her eyes, but she didn't see Subai standing there, or in other words, Subai had disappeared from her sight. Boom! Boom! A few more sounds. The woman frowned slightly at first, not knowing where the sound came from. But when the third sound came out, the woman seemed to understand something, and her eyes suddenly opened wide. She quickly walked out of the teleportation circle so that she was not teleported out. She put down the 3 tombstones on her shoulders. After landing, her figure instantly appeared beside the underworld. At this time, she saw Subai in the underworld holding the jade seal of the Dion kingdom in one hand, forcibly leaving the underworld, and holding a coffin lid in the other hand, violently hitting a tombstone in front of her. The tombstone was already crumbling and might break at any time. Subai seemed to feel someone on the shore, turned his head and saw the woman standing on the shore. You're crazy. The woman looked at Subai in disbelief. Subai relaxed his neck and said, "The master cherishes his talent, so he turns a blind eye to the disciple's transgressions, because the master knows that after the disciple has completed his understanding of the painting, he will return the painting intact. This is a tacit understanding. The master will not hesitate to punish the janitor. This is for the sake of rules, because the janitor has a low status and can be sacrificed. But if I smash all the tombstones here, and I burn all the paintings collected here, I wonder if this stupid broadcast will continue to turn a blind eye." When talking about this, Subai stuck out his tongue and licked his lips, looked at the woman on the shore, and continued in a hoarse voice. "As long as it opens its eyes, I will definitely be dead, but you, a thief who steals things, can't escape either. Correct? Now, is it interesting?" Terror Broadcast. Author, Chunji Disyao. Chapter 810. For many years, or to be exact, for many generations, radio has been torturing and training listeners in all kinds of ways in order to pursue storytelling. However, in the process of receiving training again and again, the listeners have slowly figured out the truth. Broadcast your favorite positions. For example, does it like Jessie Bond or Durex? For example, does it do some foreplay before going in? For example, does it drink a bowl of raw egg liquid or 2 cans of Red Bull before doing something? For example, does it resist or remain silent? Pretend to be comfortable and accommodate. The more powerful the listener is, the more times he has been trained, and the more he understands the broadcast. From a physical point of view, the effects are almost mutual. This woman dares to enter the place of enlightenment at this time, the place closest to the broadcast, to steal things. In fact, it is also based on an understanding of the broadcast. First, Su Fuegui has left here, the guardian who has been lying here for 20 years. This is not only a bug for those curious babies in the West, but also a bug for the powerful people in the East who have longed to take a peek at the place of enlightenment. But when Su Fuegui took off his armor and returned to his fields and left here, this woman came because she was very sure that the broadcaster would turn a blind eye, otherwise she would not dare to do this even if she had 10 more courages. The two people, Su Yuhang, are still living in a certain shadow until now, and do not dare to come out in a big way. This is enough to show that even at their level, broadcasting is still an existence that needs to be feared. But from Subai's point of view, it's a bit aggrieved and unfair. For its own purposes and hobbies, broadcasters turn a blind eye as long as the rules allow it. In order to break through the last hurdle, women need to come in. He stole a few tombstones and went back to study, but Subai had to bear the consequences of the tacit understanding between the broadcaster and the woman. Of course, Subai is not willing to do this kind of thing. His surname is Su, not Lei. In the past, the woman seemed to have always regretted not seeing Subai get sick. She originally thought that Subai had really cultivated his moral character. In other words, she thought that the cruelty and high pressure of reality had slowly smoothed Subai's edges. Or maybe it was her own strength gave Subai a sense of powerlessness, or she thought that Subai had realized that luck played a big part in the reason why he had been able to survive many times. You can't always base it on illusory luck. In the end, it always has to be rational. But the woman realized that she was wrong, very wrong. When Subai stood in the underworld and waved the coffin lid in his hand, the woman even felt her heart twitching silently. This was definitely not love at first sight but a heartbeat, but because Subai's behavior at this time was a complete trick to drag the two of them to be buried together. Yes, she is a thief, but she has the tacit approval of her master. However, this is an unspoken rule, that is, both parties understand and have a tacit understanding. But once it is put on the table, she will be the sinner of stealing broadcast things. Subai's body, of course, she cannot escape the blame for deliberately destroying tombstones for the guards, but as a thief, if the broadcast has to be brought into the light and follows normal logic, she will probably be pulled directly into a story world by the broadcast for suppression and killing, and then her inheritance and power will be used as nourishment for Chinese cabbage by broadcasters, allowing the rest of the low-level listeners to enter the story world to try to receive her inheritance and reinforcement. Women have struggled for so long, worked hard for so long, and even been stuck at this point and tortured themselves for so long, not just to be a turd. Perhaps, everyone's first reaction when facing mental illness is that it is untrue, because most people are not used to a person who does not act in accordance with everyone's normal thinking, logic and values. People in the late Ming dynasty looked with disdain and incomprehension on the Manchus with money rat tails on their heads, but in the late Qing dynasty people also looked at those revolutionary parties who deliberately cut off their pigtails and did not understand them. I am willing to study the details here and not take them out. The woman took a deep breath. She felt that she had already made a concession. Even though it was inconvenient to study in the place of enlightenment, she had to do it. Otherwise, if he takes the tombstone away from the place of enlightenment with his front foot, and Subai breaks the tombstone here with his back foot, then he will definitely be tricked to death by this mental illness. To meditate in the place of enlightenment is like a little thief eating and living in the master's house every day. No matter how well educated and tempered the master is, he will probably be unable to restrain his anger. This choice is tantamount to making a woman pay attention to the tombstone. The effect of enlightenment has been greatly reduced, but now, she can only choose to take a step back. Subai looked at the woman with a smile on his lips. The woman's expression returned to calmness. She regressed in front of Subai, which made her a little unhappy. In fact, even if she took away the tombstone, the punishment Subai suffered would only be to make the next story world task more difficult. That's it, the broadcast will not kill him, but this guardian has a strong sense of responsibility. Do you feel aggrieved? Subai pointed at the woman and asked doubtfully. An elephant retreats in front of ants, the woman replied indifferently. She didn't need to hide her attitude in front of Subai. She didn't do anything to hide it from the moment she entered this place, because Subai was not in the same class as her. A person of this level doesn't need her to care about his feelings. Oh. Subai responded, seemingly non-committal, but soon, Subai picked up the coffin lid again and smashed it down on the tombstone in front of him. Boom! The ear-splitting roar echoed around the underworld, and the tombstone itself began to tremble. Because of the jade seal, and because of the woman as an illegal intruder, Subai could mobilize the power of the Jade Seal at this time, and with the blessing of the Jade Seal, even the tombstones left by these big guys would be in front of Subai. Can't resist at all. This is the rule. These are the rules set by broadcasting here. Therefore, Subai does not need to transport the tombstone while suppressing the soul imprint left by the big guys inside like a woman. The woman couldn't understand Subai's behavior. She had obviously regressed, she had given in, and even her concession could free Subai from the punishment of this incident, but Subai still continued to smash tombstones without any scruples. The woman has already sensed the trembling of the soul mark in the tombstone. If Subai hits it again, the tombstone will crack. Once the crack occurs, it means that the Tao in the tombstone has been destroyed. There was still a smile on Subai's lips. He seemed to be resting and accumulating strength for the next swing. Because his physical condition was not very good now, he really needed to rest. Do you think you have regressed? Do you think you have been wronged? Do you think I am unreasonable? Subai kept asking, and then the smile on his face became more obvious. What I want is not your concession, but your concession from the time you appeared in front of me until now. Your pretentiousness has made me really unhappy, very unhappy. Are you threatening me? The woman looked straight at Subai. At this moment, the woman's emotions that were originally disturbed by Subai's bombardment of the tombstone calmed down. Naturally, she was not willing to be controlled by Subai. This was not in line with her style. However, Subai didn't care at all whether the woman suddenly became tougher. He just said what he wanted to say. In your mind, you are always thinking about whether the broadcast will be unpleasant, thinking about whether you will be unhappy. You should have never thought about whether I, the guardian, would be unhappy. The woman's eyes narrowed slightly. But it's a pity, I'm really unhappy. Subai's voice suddenly became heavier. You think you've given in, you think you've been wronged, but I'm telling you clearly, I just care about you. If you are unhappy, I just want to drag you to death together. The broadcast, screw the rules. I just want to drag you to death because I don't like you. You bite me. After saying that, Subai picked up the coffin lid again and smashed it down on the already fragile tombstone in front of him. The woman immediately let out a sharp scream and appeared directly beside Subai. She slapped the coffin lid in Subai's hand with one hand. The coffin lid immediately flew out and hit the underworld heavily. Immediately, the woman's other hand grabbed Subai's neck, and the two of them quickly hit the rock wall on the opposite side. Subai's back was pressed against the rock wall, and even the rock wall was dented by this. The woman was still exerting force to squeeze Subai into the rock. At the same time, the woman was originally very calm. At this moment, his face finally showed a trace of distortion caused by anger. Do you think you can scare me? Do you think this society is just like the real world, and it is not illegal to be mentally ill? Do you think I will accept your tricks? I'll make you regret it. The woman said these words, but they were so ridiculous in Subai's eyes. If she really didn't care, if she really didn't believe it, then there was no need to let the calmness she had maintained since she came in be broken just now. He said he didn't care, but actually he still cared. Come on. Subai's body was squeezed constantly and it was very painful, but Subai still stared at the woman in front of him and continued, come on, kill me quickly. Ah, you don't know who I am, right? You kill me. Killing me is a much heavier crime than blatantly stealing a few tombstones. For the first time, Subai had a sense of superiority as a civil servant. The woman's strength was increasing, and Subai's pain was increasing, but Subai still had a smile on his face. I might actually get what I want. The woman was stunned before she could finish her sentence, because she sensed that Subai's soul and body were trembling and chaotic. Is this going to self-destruct? Hurry up, don't BB, come on, Subai shouted with almost red eyes, I'm here to help you, I'm going to blow myself up, just think of it as the one who was forced to death by you, the guardian of the place where I was forced to die. Je, you are so awesome, come on. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Terror Broadcast. Author, Chunji Dixiaolong. Chapter 811. The woman took a deep look at Subai. When she looked at Subai this time, in her eyes, Subai was no longer the test subject of those two people, but had a special meaning. Of course, the woman also doubted whether Subai was really bluffing, but it seemed that it really didn't seem like it. Moreover, she knew that she was not willing to gamble, because once she lost the bet, she would be irreversible. It was a big disadvantage for her that the daughter of a rich man did not sit down in court, but was bound to gamble with Subai in her capacity. At this time, sensing the chaotic energy aura in Subai's body, the woman knew even more clearly that she could not even say a harsh word, because she herself felt that it was very likely that if she babbled one more word, she might make the person in front of her angry. This man was so stimulated that he chose the most extreme method. When you are threatened by others and you have to swallow the other person's threats, it's very uncomfortable. After taking one last serious look at Subai, the woman's figure turned into a wisp of crystal fragments and began to dissipate, in the direction of the entrance. Immediately afterwards, at the end of this place of enlightenment, which was dominated by black tones, a dazzling white light flickered. Woman. Left. Subai coughed a few times and wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth with the back of his hand. Then he flew out from the rock wall with the jade seal in his hand and came directly to the entrance. 3 tombstones, lying there quietly. In the end, the woman did not take away the tombstone. However, Subai did not feel the slightest joy as a winner. Meow. Jixiang came back with Ruyi. Ruyi was injured. It should have been injured by a woman before. The woman did not dare to be too aggressive with Subai, but for the black cat in the place of enlightenment, the woman had no psychological pressure, even if this black cats have been more dedicated than the guardians of the enlightenment for a long time, but broadcasting does not give a black cat the status of guardian. Subai checked and found that Ruyi's injury was not serious, but that he was shaken to the point of being shocked. He would need to rest for a while and wait for his soul to stabilize before he could wake up. It's not a big deal. Subai reached out and rubbed Ji Xiang's head. Ji Xiang was instinctively disgusted, but seeing that Subai's face was obviously uncomfortable, he let Subai touch it twice. Immediately, Jixiang placed Ruyi on the steps and stretched out his paws to comb Ruyi's hair. Although the two cats had not seen each other for 20 years, there was nothing wrong with Jixiang doing these things for Ruyi at this time. Auspicious. Subai suddenly sighed, and he silently sat down leaning against the lid of the coffin. Jixiang turned his head and looked at Subai, not knowing what Subai was going to say. In fact, according to Jixiang's understanding of Subai, he should rarely show such a sentimental look. He is a very decisive human being. Every time I risk my own life and bet against others, pretending that I am barefoot and scaring others into wearing shoes, even if I win in the end, I will not get any happiness or satisfaction at all. Subai stretched out his hand and wiped his face. This is Subai's truth and what he says from his heart. Many times, his illness and madness are nothing more than a desperate attempt by himself who is desperate and unwilling to compromise. But risking your own life and everything you have every time to put it on the table to scare others away is really nothing to be happy about. Meow. Jixiang called to Subai. Still weak, still too weak. Subai held the coffin with both hands and smiled. I hope someone will play this trick on me in the future and come with me to fight for my life. Every time I do this myself, it makes people think that in the past few years, I have actually been walking in circles. Jixiang crawled down on the steps, closed its eyes, and seemed to be taking a nap. Seeing that Ji Xiang didn't want to listen to his talk, Subai stopped talking nonsense and went to check on Charles's condition first. He found that this guy was still looking at the sky blankly, obviously he hadn't woken up yet. After thinking about it, Subai simply lifted him up and put him in his coffin so that he could lie down first. Reasonable and reasonable, this guy had to make a sacrifice in the end, and it seemed that the woman really had no intention of going to the western land of enlightenment. Later, Subai resettled the 3 tombstones back to their original positions. With the Dian Kingdom's jade seal in hand, the tombstones left by these big men were quite honest. After all this was done, Subai stood alone at the highest point of the altar, with the yellow spring water below still flowing, as if nothing had happened. Subai silently supported the railing with both hands, and pursed his lips. In fact, I have made some progress. For example, Su Yuhang no longer lives in his mind, and he has begun to get rid of the design and control of the man and the woman. Everything is moving in a good direction, but I really seem to lack some patience. Subai memorized the 3 tombstones chosen by the woman. After he fully recovered after a while, Subai planned to start with those 3 tombstones to understand. One way or another. Life. It always has to go on. After thinking about this, Subai shook his head and said to himself, "Damn it, why do I feel like a peasant uncle who is burdened by the burden of life?" At this time, a drop of water fell on the tip of Subai's nose. Subai stretched out his hand and touched it gently with some confusion. Then he raised his head and looked up. "It's strange, is the roof of the place of enlightenment also leaking?" The woman came out very quickly. The fat man, Buddha, and the monk who were about to arrive outside were a little surprised. She just left like that. Perhaps it was because her indifference was broken by Subai at the place of enlightenment. The woman was not. I was very satisfied with my current state of mind, so I didn't stay in front of these 3 ants for a moment and chose to leave directly. Just as she suddenly appeared outside the bronze door yesterday to find Fatty, her departure really did not take away any clouds. "Leaving?" Buddha asked. The fat man stretched out his hand to look at the formation line that had disappeared from his palm, nodded and said, "The formation is closed, so it was indeed her who left just now." "I seem to be in a bad mood," the monk said at this time. "Hey, my great monk can actually read women's minds," the fat man joked. The monk rolled his eyes at the fat man and said, "Compared with your thoughts, that woman's thoughts are actually easier to guess." Fatty. The fat man suddenly felt that compared to the previous incident of being hummed by a black man in the incinerator, this incident seemed more embarrassing. Now that the woman is gone, there is no need for the 3 people here to worry about anything. Although they cannot enter the place of enlightenment and do not know what happened inside, it can be seen from the fact that the woman was not in a happy mood when she left. Come out, Dabai inside must have suffered nothing. Now that Lord Buddha sat down, the fat man and the monk also sat down. At this time, the fat man seemed to be deliberately trying to regain his place. He deliberately reached out and touched his non-existent beard, then coughed dryly and said to the monk, "Monk, come on, sir, let me hear you." Fatty's meaning is very simple. Now that I, Fatty, and Buddha have become senior listeners, you, the monk, are still a senior. Come on, call me an adult. Isn't this the rule? Buddha smiled and said nothing. The monk smiled, bowed his head slightly to the fat man, and said, "Hello, sir." Alas, the fat man responded. The joke between the two was over, and the fat man still asked with some enthusiasm, "Monk, did you encounter any trouble in advancing?" Among the 4, Subai was the first to advance, followed by Fatty and Buddha. Now the monk is the only one left. Fatty naturally has this question. It stands to reason that the monk's talent and accumulation are definitely no worse than the 3 of them. And in fact, the 4 of them all have a consensus in their hearts. Among the 4, Subai is the purest, Fatty is the most bottomless, and Buddha is the most straightforward. As for the monk, well, he is all sinister, hypocritical, cunning, and scheming. You can stuff it into him. Buddha said at this time, "Chi-lv is too ambitious." The fat man didn't understand the meaning of the sentence, but he could hear it. The monk didn't seem to be in a hurry, and he was not in a hurry on purpose. Then he didn't need the emperor to be anxious and the eunuch to be anxious. Immediately, the fat man seemed to have thought of something. He stood up and walked to his car. He took out a box of beer and several generations of pickled pepper chicken feet and dried tofu from the trunk. "Brothers, we haven't gotten together for a long time. Let's have a drink together." "Monk, just make do with it. It's not easy to make tea in the wild mountains here." The monk directly picked up a can of beer and opened the tab. Apparently the monk didn't mind. The three of them raised their beers together, but found that there seemed to be one person missing. The fat man suddenly said, "Which of you has a photo of Dabai on your phone? Let's put his photo up here and treat him as if he is sitting next to us." The three of them looked at each other for a long time and all shook their heads. Obviously, none of the three of them had a photo of Sudbai on their phones. Who would take a photo of a man and put it in their phone? It's a pity that Sudbai is now in the land of proving the way, and even if the fat man joins forces with the monk, it is impossible for him to directly activate the formation of the land of proving the way and then enter calmly like the woman did before. There is an absolute gap in strength. There is currently no way to make up for it. Su Fugui could still convey information to the outside world even if he was lying in the place of enlightenment, but now Sudbai obviously can't do it. At the end, the fat man suddenly laughed and said, "Come on, let's clink glasses first. I'll get two, and I'll get one for Dabai." The fat man held 2 cans of beer in his hand and clinked glasses with Buddha and the monk. Then, the three of them each took a sip. Then the fat man poured the can of beer belonging to Sudbai directly on the ground. This was no different from sprinkling rice wine on the grave. "Ha ha ha ha, doesn't Dabai just live underground?" The wind blowing across the Urhai lake came here, blowing over the grass and the smell of wine scattered on the ground. It slowly floated in the air and slowly dissipated. Terror broadcast. Author, Chunji Disyao. Chapter 812. On January 23, 1923, American Osborne and Chinese Zheng Jun founded the China Radio Company, broadcasting radio programs in Shanghai for the first time through their self-built radio station, and selling radios at the same time. There are more than 500 radios in the city to receive the radio program. This is the earliest radio in Shanghai and the first in the country. Later, with the continuous establishment of radio stations, radios gradually emerged in the Shanghai area. They were all imported products, with the United States producing the most. One of the types was mineral radios, and the other was tube radios. Most citizens liked to use mineral radios. Before the popularity of television, radio was undoubtedly the most important entertainment tool for mankind. Nowadays, most people born in the 1980s in China have the memory of listening to the radio as a child. However, with the development of the times, first the popularity of television, and then due to the promotion of computers and the internet, the status of radio has naturally deteriorated, and has even reached an extremely embarrassing point. For example, there is a tacit understanding in the news industry that if a reporter from the TV station does not come to a press conference, then wait until the reporter comes and sets up the camera before starting. If a reporter from the newspaper industry does not come, then wait another hour. If it doesn't come, let's start. And if the reporter from the radio news program doesn't come, what, who do you mean doesn't come? Nowadays, radio, that is, radio programs, can be roughly divided into 2 main groups of people in China, one is students and the other is drivers. In the early years, there were actually migrant workers who were considered the third category, but now most construction site workers' dormitories are equipped with routers covering Wi-Fi. Naturally, migrant workers holding smartphones no longer need they rely on radio programs to kill boring time, and for students and drivers, radio just fits the characteristics of their work and life. Therefore, many radio programs now basically insert real-time traffic information in local cities. They themselves also know that now what kind of people are most likely to listen to your own programs. Okay, listeners, today, our Golden Melody Years program ends here. Welcome everyone to listen to our program tonight. Tomorrow, we will be on FM 92.9 Nantong Music and Traffic Radio. See you there. The operator across the glass cut into the advertisement and made an okay gesture to the female announcer inside. The female announcer smiled knowingly, took off her headset, and then gently pinched her. My wrists are indeed sore from sitting for so long. Nowadays, the job of being a radio host has gradually transformed from the iron rice bowl and glamorous appearance that everyone envied more than 10 or 20 years ago into a kind of persistence, just like the people in the past knitted straw sandals for wearing at home and taking out. Selling it is now treated as a kind of art, and radio hosts have gradually begun to change in this direction. Nowadays, if you look up the resumes of famous hosts on many TV stations, you will find that they were actually engaged in broadcasting and radio hosting. When the size of this big ship began to gradually decrease, many people had to choose to change jobs and replan their careers. The root of life. Sister Lou, late night snack. As soon as the female host came out of the studio, the man who had just gestured to her immediately brought out a piece of wontons. It was obvious that she had ordered takeout at the right time. The wontons were still hot and had not expanded. I mean, Chenda, you can't be so partial. Where's mine? The female assistant on the side yelled with some dissatisfaction. You are treating us differently, which is not conducive to our united work, the female assistant said with a joking expression. He stared at the young man named Chenda, not very angry. After all, although the female anchor surnamed Lou is over 30 years old, she takes good care of herself. Her skin is smoother and more lovable than a 20-year-old girl, and her cold temperament is also fascinating. It's amazing, even the female assistant herself admitted that even though she was a woman, she couldn't help but have some associations with Sister Lou, and even once doubted her true orientation. As for a young man like Chenda, he naturally couldn't control himself when faced with such a beautiful woman. Less than a month after being assigned here, he started to be courteous non-stop. They were both women, and the female assistant found that she was actually jealous. If you don't get up, maybe it's because you are too good. Come on, Xiaofang, I'll give it to you. Sister Lou handed the wontons in her hand to the female assistant Xiaofang. Xiaofang said a little embarrassedly, how can this happen? This is Chenda's wish. I almost cut the wrong order just now because I was trying to squeeze in the time to order the takeout advertisement. You can eat it? I like to eat chow chow, but I don't really like wontons. Sister Lou placed the wontons on Xiaofang's table, and then took off her coat from the hanger on one side. Nantong is a coastal city, and even though it's already summer, it's still quite cool at night when I go home after the late night program. Copycat? Then I'll order copycat next time. Chenda didn't mind that the wontons he bought were cheaper than Xiaofang. He actually knew that it was impossible for him and Sister Lou to be together. On the one hand, it was Sister Liu's usual cold temperament. It was difficult for him to have that kind of voyeurism. Moreover, Sister Lou was not the kind of empty and lonely woman. Even if she wanted to be a young lady and get close to others, she still wasn't interested at all. But men are so mean sometimes. Even though they know that there is no possibility of any development or possibility between the two of them, they still can't help but be nice to her. Sister Lou is not young. Although she is well maintained, it is impossible to guess her exact age, but she can still feel that she is about the age of a mother. Sister Lou can naturally understand Chenda's thoughts about her. It is the wisdom of a woman to be able to rise and let go, and to have a good sense of proportion. To be precise, it is the wisdom needed to be a beautiful and charming woman. When we walked out of the gate of the radio station, the weather was a bit unfavorable and it began to rain slightly, which made the night even more cool. There are 2 barbecue stalls not far away from the entrance. They have no storefronts and are considered mobile stalls. In fact, doing this kind of business can make a lot of money. Everything sold at the barbecue stalls can be wholesaled, and the wholesale price is not expensive. The utensils are all one-time purchases that will be used for a long time, and the cost has already been recovered, plus no store fees are required. And if you go out to set up a stall at night, as long as you know the rules and consciously clean up the area when closing the stall, there will rarely be trouble from the urban management and the like, but people will be more tired. Of course, living in this world is itself a kind of thing. It's quite tiring. Sister Lou carried her bag and walked to a stall. The stall was run by a couple, with a brother-in-law as a helper. The business was tepid, with only half of the people seated, but the night was still going on, so it was pretty good. Just like the third child, Sister Lou said to the landlady with a smile. "Yes, you can sit down." The landlady first took the initiative to take a rag and wipe the table next to her that had already been wiped before asking Sister Lou to sit here. This was probably because Sister Lou was a regular customer and the landlady knew she is from a radio station, so she is extra polite. Of course, the most important thing is that the proprietress and her husband are both from Sichuan, just like Sister Lou. Once people leave their hometown, they feel the warmth of dialect. After Sister Lou sat down, the wife of the boss cooked the brains for Sister Lou herself. Originally, the boss's barbecue stall did not sell brains, but because Sister Lou liked to eat them, the wife of the boss prepared some every day. I am a friend who lives far away from home, and when I meet a fellow countryman who has a good taste, I always feel particularly cordial. Not many people in Nantong like to eat brains, or in other words, not many people in the coastal areas of Jiangsu and Zhejiang like this kind of food. In addition, there are also very few people who like to eat duck intestines and goose intestines, but these are indeed it is a favorite delicacy of Sichuan's people. Sichuan people naturally have their own methods to remove the fishy smell of these foods and make them delicious. Some of the people at the next table who were having barbecue together couldn't help but glance at Sister Lou. They probably felt that the probability of meeting such a beautiful woman at the barbecue stall in the middle of the night was indeed too low. They commented on Sister Liu's appearance in dialect, and some of them were indeed a bit unpleasant to listen to. But they felt that they were speaking in Nanhua dialect. They thought that Sister Lou, who had just communicated with the boss's wife in Trump, could not understand them. Since they did not understand the language, they naturally did not understand. There will be no embarrassment, and Nantong dialect is indeed the most difficult to understand in the national dialect system. Sister Lou understood, but she didn't pay attention. She didn't even move her eyebrows even when the young men across from her used her body to make dirty jokes. Since you live in this world, while you enjoy the beautiful aspects of this world, you also need to get used to the dirty and disgusting things in this world. Fortunately, Nea Hua, Chow Chow, and a bowl of Mackay have been served. With food, I can temporarily distract myself. The landlady served a bowl of rice to Sister Lou and then went to do her own business. Sister Lou ate quietly alone. This was perhaps her most relaxing moment of the day. The landlady is also a sentimental person. If she is not busy at night, she always likes to sit next to Sister Lou and set up a dragon gate formation with her. The most talked about is her pair of children. The couple goes out to work to make money, and the 2 children stay behind. Kawachi was in middle school, so naturally he was very worried. Most people in the world have the impression that Sichuan girls are hot, but in fact, Sichuan girls are the most family-oriented and have a strong sense of responsibility and dedication to the family. This can be seen most clearly in the boss lady. The boss lady also asked Sister Lou if she had children of her own, because she was not sure that many urban white-collar workers like Sister Lou didn't want children even at their age. For modern urbanites, carrying on the family line and inheriting the incense is no longer a mission but a constraint. Sister Lou once answered. She seemed to have pondered for a while, and then she replied, "Yes. It is really strange to have to answer with a question about whether you have children, but the boss lady automatically thought that Sister Lou might have been divorced before and the children were with her husband. The noodles are very refreshing, the soup is also very delicious, the brains are tender and smooth, and the braised vegetables are also very tasty." This authentic Sichuan-style late-night snack is actually a small dish specially prepared by the proprietress for Sister Lou. Just like when Chinese people open restaurants in the United States, the Chinese food in the restaurant will have very strange tastes in order to deliberately cater to American tastes. Although the proprietress and his wife are authentic Sichuans, the barbecue and late-night snacks they usually sell cannot be considered authentic Sichuan. It tastes bad, because most locals are not used to it, even if the sign on the front of the food truck's grill is Old Chengdu Barbecue. Especially the plate of spicy millet and the plate of kimchi placed in front of Sister Lou. Locals would not ask the boss for these when having late-night snacks, but these are must-have items in restaurants in Sichuan. Before she finished eating, Sister Liu's cell phone rang. There was no memo number, but it was not unfamiliar, because Sister Liu's cell phone was not used very often. She rarely played with it, and there was no one in her address book. The name is very inconsistent with the current mobile phone usage habits, but it does not hinder Sister Liu's life. Sister Lou answered the phone, and a man's voice came from the phone. "After get off work, I'll drive over to pick you up." Sister Lou responded and then hung up the phone. A man drove out late at night to pick up a woman who had finished the evening shift. According to normal logic, the relationship between the two should be very close, but judging from the tone of the man's words and Sister Liu's judging from the response, it seems that the relationship between the two is very cold. When Sister Lou felt that she had eaten well, a very ordinary Volkswagen drove over and parked on the side of the road. There was a man wearing black short sleeves sitting in the car. The man was holding a mobile phone and there was a mobile phone fixed in front of him. Mobile phone, this is the common accessory of Didi masters nowadays. Although in recent years, because Didi defeated other competitors and became a dominant player, the initial benefits have been almost reduced, these driver masters have no other options. The conscience of a capitalist. Sister Lou heard the sentence said by the middle-aged man in the car more than once. Sister Lou paid the bill and got in the car, but she did not sit in the passenger seat, but in the back. Obviously, this is an attitude and a kind of distance. If it is an ordinary man who comes out to pick up someone in the middle of the night, if this woman still refuses to sit in the passenger seat and deliberately alienates herself, she will probably lose interest in it within a few days. In this impetuous age, who is more sincere than who? But this man made it a habit to pick her up. In other words, coming to pick her up every day has become a part of his life. Capital is good before monopoly. After monopoly, it becomes exploiter. The man closed the Didi app on his mobile phone. Apparently, he was off work after picking up the woman tonight. Sister Lou ignored the man. Although the man spoke less and less, Sister Lou was no longer interested in talking to him. On the back of the front seat of the car, there is a word and a painting taped to each other. They are all new, because Sister Lou knows that this man writes a word and draws a painting every day, and then sticks them on the car in front. Take your seat. When driving during the day, if there is a passenger who appreciates it, you can chat more with him. If he doesn't appreciate it, there is no need to talk. Sister Lou remembered that in her impression, this man talked a lot, but he spoke very little when writing and drawing. He seemed to be immersed in his own world. At the beginning, this man also proudly boasted to her that he relied on his hands. Painting has captured the hearts of many literary and artistic women. But now, it seems that is all gone. He is also older, although it cannot be seen from his appearance. But life lasts only 100 years. The ancients said that at 30 and 40, one does not have doubts, at 50 and one knows destiny. Everyone knows destiny at this age. Ordinary people can become much more free and easy at this age. What's more, this man's experience is much better than that of ordinary people. It can be much richer. The man started the car. Nantung was a city with few traffic jams, so it was naturally more comfortable to drive in the nighttime traffic conditions. Sister Lu leaned gently against the car door and glanced at the not-so-glorious neon lights outside. This was a quiet city, which was why she chose to settle down in the city. Because the city is close to Shanghai, although it is not appropriate to call it a satellite city of Shanghai in terms of size, after all, because it is adjacent to Shanghai and only separated by the Sutong Bridge, it seems to be attracted by the prosperous Shanghai. It has absorbed the hustle and bustle of the city that should belong to it. In comparison, although Chengdu is an inland city, the level of crowding and hustle and bustle is much more serious than Nantung on the eastern coast. The car entered the main road and then got on the Jianghai Avenue elevated road. The man driving the car played a song called Sisera. It is the theme song of a Japanese TV series called Midnight Diner. The tune is very peaceful and suitable for evening listen in silence. This TV series from Japan was also copied in China a while ago, but the exaggeration and frivolity ran through it, completely losing the flavor of the original Japanese TV series. Sister Lu let out a sigh, as if her and his youth and impulse had passed away. When you lose something, you will miss it more and more. When you are tired of playing with something, only then will he regret his previous lack of restraint. Unfortunately, many times in life, there is no turning back. After a long time, the car got off Jianghai Avenue and turned into the service road. Sister Lu does not live in the urban area of Nantung, but in the suburban Xingren town. The two of them bought a house in a community called Renhe Homes in the town. The reason for settling there is not because the housing prices in the urban area are too expensive, but because the two of them seem to prefer to drive out to relax for a while at this time in the evening. If they live in the city and simply go out for a drive just to relax, they will lose the sense of joy on the way home from get off work. This kind of atmosphere and very ridiculous reason were accepted by both of them at the same time. Fortunately, we didn't buy this community in the first place. When passing by a residential complex, the man pointed. This is a very ordinary community, but it looks like it was just built in the past few years, and it doesn't seem to be very popular. A group of Shanghai Nesa people came here specially to buy a house, and then they didn't live in it. Instead, they put an urn as a mourning hall. The man shook his head and said, "In this building, the living people may not even live in the dead. Too many, alas." What Sister Lu cares about is not that there are more houses in the building that serve as mourning halls than living people. What she cares about is that this man actually pays special attention to this matter and tells it to her like an anecdote. The man didn't seem to care about Sister Liu's opinion. He just continued talking to himself, because after the two returned home, they basically stopped communicating and went back to their respective rooms. The price of cemeteries over there has also been skyrocketed. A better cemetery costs hundreds of thousands. It's better to buy a house in the suburbs of a nearby city and use it as a mourning hall. In the past, you could often see small houses used as tombs in the countryside. Yes, it's become more atmospheric now, and people's houses are used as tombs. Sister Lu closed her eyes slightly. Unfortunately, she couldn't rest for long because the car soon turned into the community where she lived and the man stopped the car. Sister Lu also got out of the car, and then the man locked the car. The two stopped talking and went upstairs in silence. The man opened the door. Sister Lu entered her room, and the man entered his own room. Living under the same roof, they seem to belong to two worlds, but in fact, they are really the same kind of people. After taking a shower in the bathroom in the room, Sister Lu did not dry her hair. Instead, She let her wet hair stick to her shoulders and slowly sat down on the edge of the bed. The furnishings in the room are very simple, there is no TV or dressing table, and there is not even a router at home. Ordinary entertainment projects have long lost their appeal to them, but what can really attract them may be the essence of life. Because this can make them feel. He is still alive. Lonely. Not lonely, nor lonely. In terms of life and society, they are two very insignificant people, and in terms of their life path, they are also two very insignificant people, because it seems that only the two of them are still moving forward on this road. A long time ago, they had companions. But some people give up, some people leave, and leaving probably means that even if they look back, they still can't see the familiar figures. Maybe, at the beginning, they can still feel a little lonely, but slowly, when they were the only two people around, they silently accepted this reality. Maybe, at this time, there are many people who have joined or are preparing to join this path, but they have gone too far, many people are looking at them, many pairs of eyes are staring at them. Because they have gone far, the people behind expect to see an answer from them. But actually, there is no answer. Because this way, there is no choice. There was a radio on Sister Liu's bedside table. She looked at the time and saw that it was almost 1 o'clock. Sister Liu turned on the radio. Welcome to the Midnight Horror Story Show. I am the host Sun Ran, and the story I bring to you today is called. After listening to this paragraph, Sister Liu pressed the radio to stop playing. Seem. This long night. This boring life. This unchanging life. I can only rely on the opening paragraph of this Midnight Ghost Story program to make my soul instinctively flutter a little.